Hi everyone. In this video, I'm going to be going over the first lab assignment for CIT 247. So, this video is going to be the first of many that go over assignments. These are going to be called assignment overview videos. As the name implies, this series of videos is meant to go over each lab, like communicate expectations, provide some tips, and if necessary, provide some demonstrations. So, another thing to note here is that this video specifically is going to go over how to use GNS and teach you what this file here is for. So when you go to work on a lab, you need to make sure you download this file right here, lab 1 report. Very, very important that you use this. So basically, these lab report files are templates. They contain all the questions in the lab that you need to answer. They have here where you can put your first and last name and then your lab partner's first and last name. You can also you need to place your instructor's name here and then the date of submission. After that, then you can answer your questions. Do pay do mind or pay mind to these instructions here. They tell you to do this stuff, but also tell you this. If you work with a lab partner, you need to record that person's name. Now, we do permit you to work with lab partners in this class. Help you all get to know one another, and you don't need the same lab partner. These are not group assignments, but you can actually work as a team of two if you wish. Not required by any means, but it's something you can do because these can be a little hard for some people. Don't get me wrong, they are pretty tough. This is somewhat of a challenging class, but do note that me and Dr. Assad have worked hard on redesigning these labs to be easier and more or less time consuming. So you should have an easier time than for students with previous semesters. But anyway, here is the first lab assignment. I actually helped redesign these to look nicer as well. One feature I added was introduction pages. So this is a page here that goes over what you're going to be doing in the lab and what it's about. Provides a topology to let you know what your topology or network is going to look like for this lab, and then some learning objectives. Basically, what you'll be doing in the lab and what you need to know after you leave it or finish it. So yeah, please don't skim over this page. It's very important, I would say, especially this picture here. There's some very important information on this page that will help you succeed in the lab. So please note that you should read it before you can start your lab. In general, before you start your labs, it's a really good idea to read the PowerPoint textbook reading, or at least as much as you want. You can also watch Dr. Assad's lecture video. So all that information is important, especially the lab, or excuse me, the PowerPoint and the textbook reading are very important because the questions you have in these labs are based on the material from those. So if you read the material, like the lab assignment, or excuse me, the textbook reading and the PowerPoint, if you read that when you're going through lab questions, you can use like the material there. You can also cite online sources, but note you'll need to cite them, and if you don't, you'll be in trouble. So you can do that if you want to, but just pay attention and make sure you cite your sources, please. So the first section in this lab assignment is just using GNS. This is a tutorial. It's a pretty long one, at least in terms of page length, but it has pictures, so it's not too long. I'm just going to demonstrate this all in GNS, so don't have to read through it all for you. But here's your first question. It's just providing a screenshot. How you can do that is use this tool called snipping tool. Took a little while to get the name of here, but just click that, and you have this here. You can click that, and you can like take a snapshot of whatever you want. I'm not gonna save that obviously, but this tool is really helpful in taking snapshots for this class. Snapshots are good for helping prove that you've done the work, and that's why I asked them of you. But before we go on the lab document, let's look at GNS. So when you go into your VM, obviously you're not going to see these folders, those are mine. But when you go into your VM for 247, you'll see this gecko icon. That's GNS3. Give it a click. When you open it the first thing you'll see is this pop-up window which asks you to name your project. What I would like you all to do when you name your project is please provide your last name, and then after that, provide the name of the lab. If you want, you can also put the word lab at the end. You don't need to, don't have to. It's up to you. Then press OK. So, this is GNS3. One thing to note is when you get in here, this may like these things here, these windows here may be pretty big and you won't have much workspace. One thing you do, just grab the little circles on them, drag it down as far as you can, you have a lot more workspace. Note that GNS has two navigation bars. This top one, this top horizontal one, and this one on the left that's excuse me, this top vertical one. Forgive me. So, these three buttons are very important here. When you click here, you'll see all the routers you can use. We won't be using these in this lab though. Then you'll see this button here, the two arrows, shows all the switches. For the most part, you'll be using this kind of switch. Sometimes you use this Ethernet switch, but this one's a custom one that was made by the previous faculty member, and it's the one you're going to be using pretty much all the time. Ignore the hub, ignore the frame relay switch, and all the other stuff. We don't use it here. Especially, why would anyone use a hub at all? Anyway, when you want to use the device, click on this bar here. You see it's glowing blue. Drag into this workstation and let go. Hey, you have a switch there. Then we have end devices. So scroll all the way down. And you have your PCs. This is what you're going to be using. It's pretty much the only end device you can use in this class. With one exception, but you can get into that later. It's not even required. But anyway. So these are the three devices we're going to be using in the first lab. You can actually highlight and grab them all. You can move them wherever you want. Now, I would like when you build your topologies in GNS that you make them resemble the picture here as much as possible. Like, for example, I really don't want you to do crazy stuff like that. It makes it a little harder to understand how things laid out. When you have it nice and neat, it looks professional and it makes it a lot easier to know what's going on with this thing, basically. So we have the devices out, but they're not connected. To connect them, click this snake icon. It'll have a red circle with an X in it, and your cursor will be a plus sign. So when you click a device, it'll list all the interfaces you can use. PCs always have one. Switches have about 12 or so. You can, for this lab, you can pick whatever interface on the switch you want, but note that future labs will require you to use specific interfaces, and if you don't use those interfaces, the lab won't work. So please be very careful. When you're done connecting your devices, click this button again. The X and circle go away, and you have your cursor back. So, you can actually see which interfaces are being used by the cables by pressing this button right here. This is the show/hide interface labels. So unfortunately, GNS does not do a very good job of automatically placing these labels. It's about as good as someone dumping a bunch of blocks on the ground. So we need to fix it. So you can actually grab these labels, and you can move them pretty close to like the source or the interface they're associated with. That would look good. So stuff to avoid is stuff like this, where the interface label is under or could be over like the cable. That makes it hard to read. Unfortunately, there are instances like with a certain lab component you'll be using later in this class that will unfortunately just have these things under the cables no matter what. But that's just something to keep in mind. Generally, you want these not under the cables, but looking neatly like this. And now, one other thing to learn is this button right here, which lets you make notes. So for this lab, you'll need to make a note with your name in it. And that's how you do that. You can put that there. So when you want to start your devices, press the green triangle. When you want to stop them, press the red square. Don't use that plus button, please. I don't think it really has any purpose in this class, but yeah, let's go ahead and start these devices. So at this point, after you've set up your lab, you'll begin working on it, which section 2 goes over right here. So one thing to keep in mind is as you're working on these labs, you'll have questions like this, in addition to requests for screenshots. So what's good to do is you can probably stop in what you're doing with the lab and answer the question. If you do have a PowerPoint open or like the textbook by your side, it shouldn't take too long to answer these questions. One thing to keep in mind though is that most of these questions typically have a sentence requirement. Basically, this is the minimum number of questions or sentences that should appear in your answer. If you go below the minimum, you may lose points, so keep that in mind, please. But if you go over the limit or the minimum, you may actually get extra credit. This is already said here, but please do your best to at least meet the requirement. The requirement's put there to make sure you understand the material. When you have to explain in some level of depth, it does increase your understanding. So please make sure you do your best on these. I've had some students that have given some really good answers in their questions, and I love to see that. So please go all out if you want to. If you don't have time, just at least at least meet the minimum. I'd appreciate it. But anyway, working hard in these questions, really the main benefit is increasing your understanding. So, the rest of this assignment is basically just setting up the PCs and answering questions based on the configurations. But I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do that. So when you want to configure a device, double click it. There. That was weird. GNS may have some weird stuff like that. Like I double clicked that and it didn't work. No, just double click it again. GNS has some weird stuff. If you run into anything big, just let me know and I'll do my best to help you out. But anyway, this is the terminal for PC1. Note that these PCs and also the switches and routers do not have GUI interfaces. You will need to learn how to use the command line in this class. But the PCs thankfully have a very simple command line interface. Actually, if you just do this question button here, these are all the commands that can be used on the PCs. That's it. That's all that's available. And you won't even use all these either. To be fairly honest, you won't even need to use all of these to begin with. One you will be using is the show command. Instead of ipconfig or ifconfig, we have show, similar to a switch. But anyway, you'll see there's nothing configured on here. No IP address or mask, no gateway, and no MAC address configured. Or there is a MAC address configured, but that's about it. But anyway, let's go ahead and configure an IP address. We do that with the IP command. So IP 192.168.0.1. That's an IP address. Now you don't actually need to provide a mask in this lab. Future labs you will, but this one you don't. Actually, the computer will automatically generate one based on the IP address. So if we do show command, we actually just do sh instead of show. That's a shortcut. Still brings about the same results. That's something to keep in mind in this class is that many commands have shortcut. The shortcuts are really good to learn because they save a lot of time. Anyway, we see the new IP address and mask we configured. So let's go ahead and minimize this and get out of the way. Let's go to PC2. So IP 192.168.0.2. So we have two PCs, or we have the two PCs configured with IP addresses. So how do we bring back the old terminal for PC1? Well, if you go here in the Linux taskbar, press terminal, it brings up every terminal you have open. You can just press this one again, and it'll bring it back. You have both of them. Okay. So, now that we have IP addresses configured on these two, we want to make sure these two devices can ping. So, let's go ahead, or we want to make sure they can communicate. We do this by using the ping command. So we type ping, and then the IP address of the other device. So PC1 is the source device, PC2 is the destination device. When you're pinging on the source device, make sure you put the IP address as the destination device. And here we see an example of a successful ping attempt. So 5 lines will appear when the successful ping works. Well, for the most part, sometimes you may get a few errors here and there, but as long as it can ping for the most part, you should be good. Here's some examples of some errors that can happen though. Sometimes the ping won't work, and you can get one of two error messages, or for the most part, or usually you will. So let me demonstrate. So we're going to change IP or PC2's IP address. Put in another subnet. Subnet is also another layer 3 network. You'll learn about that later in this course, but basically PC2 has been placed in a different layer 2 network. Note that it's still in the same broadcast domain as PC1, but it's in a different layer 3 network. Let's see if PC1 can ping PC2 in this new IP address. So note that PC1 cannot. There's no router to help PC1 reach the device in a different layer 3 network, so PC1 couldn't reach it. So there's no gateway found means that PC1 was trying to ping something outside of its subnet but couldn't reach it because there was no router. If we ping PC2's old IP address, it doesn't exist right now, so you just get a timeout error. So these are the three ping results you'll typically see. There's a fourth one, but we won't get that till like the end of the semester. So this is the example of a proper ping or a good ping result. That means the two devices can communicate. These two mean they can't. So that's, oh, one other thing. Before you leave your lab, make sure you do the save command. This saves your work. If you turn these devices off and didn't use save, you would lose your configurations. That's true for also switches and routers, but there's different save commands. We'll learn about that later, but basically, please always save your work. Actually, save your work repeatedly as you go through the lab to make sure you don't lose your work. When you're done, just press X and then yes. You can also turn off the devices if you want. You don't need to though. It doesn't really matter. GNS automatically does that. So when you're done, go to Files, this filing cabinet icon. Go to the folder GNS3, the folder Projects, and then these will be all the GNS projects you've worked on throughout the semester. Note that I've had a lot of them because I've been a TA for over a year now. It's almost a year and a half by the time the semester is over. But anyway, here's the project I worked on. So when you're done, when you find your project, right click it and click compress. Then press create and then close. So why did we do this? So we zip these projects because we want to transfer them to our account. We want to basically get them out of the VM and put them on the host device. The way you do that is by going to Firefox and then go into your NKU email account and then go to Outlook. I'll show you that. I have my email open. When you're in Outlook, in your school account, you press these 9 dots and press OneDrive. Then you can either drag and drop or like look for the file with a browse button or whatever and download your file that way. And download, when you put it on your PC, submit your GNS file alongside this lab report to Canvas. You need to submit both of them to Canvas to get points. But anyway, that's about it. Oh, wait a minute, one more thing. When you submit these GNS projects, when you compress them, I mean, sometimes people will go into the folder and just compress this. Please don't do this. Like, seriously, please don't do this. The problem with doing this is that this is just a topology. Like, this is literally just a topology in GNS. This here has all your configurations and the router images. If you fail to submit both of these in your GNS compressed file, I basically will not see your work and you'll lose points. Just keep that in mind. So always compress the parent folder. In other words, compress the folder that contains these two things. This project files folder is incredibly important. Please submit these together. But that's it. Thank you very much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you need help. I'm here to help you. That's my job as a TA. You can email me and I'll be available, especially on Wednesday and Friday. I'm available. You can also ask for help on my office hours. Whenever you need help, just reach out to me and I'm happy to help you. But thank you very much for watching this video, and I hope you all have a great day.